In this episode of BYTECamp, we invited JM Erestain to talk about his experiences in teaching tech skills to oneself. If you want to learn more about it, then stay tuned. Hello, and welcome to BYTECamp's Bytes First podcast, with this year's theme being Activating Potential in the Tech Space. Want to learn about the different facets of tech? Then you found yourself listening to the right podcast. I am Luis Quintos, and I am joined with
Brady Lau, one of your fellow hosts for this year's Byte Camp. And to all our listeners, Byte and non-Byte members alike, we warmly invite you to activate your potential in the different and exciting spaces of tech.
Absolutely, Bradley. We are all about focusing on simple and actionable steps that can lead you to the path in tech that you wish to pursue. And for today's episode, our topic will be how to teach tech to oneself.
Yes, the skills in tech might be difficult to learn, but it is surely not impossible. And for today's episode, we invited JM Erestain to share with us his experiences when it comes to this topic.
So, hello, JM, and welcome to Byte's first ever podcast. Thank you very much for joining us today. And before we start, we just wanted to ask you, how are you doing today? Since it's a Monday, it's the start of the week. Kamusta ka?
It's actually pretty tiring, but it's the good kind of tiring, fulfilling. I had a lot of stuff to do before coming over here, but it's always it feels good, at least inside, that I'm productive at the start of the week. Yep.
So, madami ka bang ginagawa recently? Madami kang ginagawa recently?
Actually, yeah, sobra eh. Kasi, recently we scaled up in the company, and we've been servicing more people. Like, it's been kind of crazy kasi dumadami na yung mga clients namin recently. So yeah, it's been kind of busy the past few.
So, we'll get into that more later about your company. Sana marami kang makwento about your company. And we're glad to hear naman na despite being tired, you're doing well. And it's a fulfilling type of tiring. And I feel like that's the best type of tiring naman eh. Since you're doing what you like and you're doing what you love. And with this, we'll start it off with introducing yourself. So, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners so they can get to know you more? Like, your name, what course are you in, and what year are you in, and your hobbies, ganon.
Yeah, sure. All right. So nice to meet you guys. Thanks to everyone for listening. So my name's JM Erestain. I'm from 3BS ITE. I do software engineering and cybersecurity, as well as consultancy. I guess that's a good short introduction for myself.
3BS. Wait, so you're two batches higher than me.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, wow, like, you're just one batch higher than me, and like you're a software engineer and like a consultant for like cybersecurity, I guess. That's really impressive. It's really impressive, I must say.
Thanks.
Dami mo nang naabot. So,
Yeah.
when you started software engineering and cybersecurity, like, what were the important skills did you teach yourself when it came to tech?
Okay, you'll always hear this when you're trying to learn, like, not just actually both. When you're trying to learn software engineering and cybersecurity, the most important thing to learn is critical thinking talaga. You need to be able to discern things that you need to do and when on the get-go, especially when you're creating something for people. You don't always just make something for yourself, but like, of course, as a passion, as a hobby, you end up creating things for yourself, but especially in the context of creating your own business, adding value, and then having people make use of whatever you create, and those people relying on what you create, you need to be able to make certain decisions talaga. And I think that's the most important part, the most foundational part of being in those two domains, of software engineering and cybersecurity.
So, when you started software engineering and cybersecurity, like, importante ba rin magkaroon ng tamang diskarte? when you were working on these?
Yeah, definitely. Kasi a lot of people, they get too deep into, like what they're actually doing, when most times you don't really need to recreate the wheel. So for example, making use of open source technology, open source software, you don't always have to recreate the wheel, especially when, let's say na this team that maintains this open source software has a higher capacity of development and testing than you do. Most often, especially at our scale, mas magaling sila. Okay, you gotta let them have it. So talagang discarte lang on being able to discern rin na parang, okay, what are the pros and cons? So gagamitin ko na lang ba to, or do I just make my own? Kasi ako kontrolado.
Oo.
Ganon.
Mas pina-prioritize mo din kung ano yung mga kailangan ng tao, ganun ba?
Because you're not really just creating the program, you're also creating an experience. You're creating a solution, and the program is just part of it. So
So when you started creating this program, and when you started giving solutions to your market, like how and when did you start teaching yourself about these things?
Siguro mga bandang 2014, like I was already starting to learn how to do programming and everything. So
Wait, but, sorry, how old were you in 2014?
I was 15. Yeah.
Wow.
15. Wow.
So early.
15. I mean, of course, at that time, I wasn't like great at it, like at that time, I wasn't really that good at it. Pero like when I was reading most of the time, like not even like like documents or what. Mga binabasa ko puro news. I was getting inspiration. I was like, okay, this one looks really cool. And that was during like sort of rise pa ng Bitcoin. I was really interested in Web3 at that time. And I was reading all about it, all of the different businesses. And the one thing I was always asking in my head was, how could I bring it here to the Philippines? How could I bring it home? So since then, dun pa lang, I was already learning all sorts of things. And most of those things I wasn't qualified for. Like sobrang hirap na eh. Like, how do you do this and that? But then I guess being in that environment where I pressure myself to learn those things that I can't possibly learn at that time, like brought me to a point na I can piece things, that I can piece the smaller, easier parts much better na. Ganon.
So when you started learning about these things, like did someone inspire you to do these things, or sariling sikap mo lang talaga na yun?
Yeah, someone did. I'll drop his name. It's Kevin Abiera. He was one of our co-founders back in the day. In 2015 kasi we started a startup. We got funded. And he was one of our teammates. And like, in my eyes at the time, the only thing I could do was HTML, CSS at that time, And in my eyes, like, oh my God, this guy can make anything, Then he had to leave. Thing is, like, he imparted me with such a sad message. He was like, you guys are still young. And he was already a dropout of college at that time. I was still third year. And he was like, you guys are so young, kaya niya yan. Like, whatever you guys do, you'll be able to make it. Just like, practice and everything. So I got so inspired, not gonna lie. Like, I was like, I was like pouring tears at that time. So I decided to like,
hagulgol, sobrang hagulgol nung narinig mo yan from him.
Yeah, for real. Kasi I had to fill in his shoes rin. So yeah, it was he was inspiring at that point.
Nice. That's nice to hear. So from Kevin Naviera, like, if you were to say something, would you like to give a message to him since you're on our podcast?
Pwede.
Baka naman.
Yo, Kevin, if you see this, I'm better than you, but
Kagalingan.
Overtaking him na.
Joke lang. Miss you, my dude. Yun lang.
Nice.
So, just to give like the listeners a clue lang, no? So, around anong age na ngayon si Kevin Naviera, or like what was his age back then when he met him?
I think he was like 22 or something, 23 at that time. And that was a long time ago, 7 years. He's probably like 30 now. Jesus, he's old. Oh my God.
Not that old. Not that old.
Not that old. Sorry.
Life starts pa nga.
Tama.
Yeah, 10 years pa. Anyways, like, what was your mindset? Like, what mindset did you have, like, when it came to committing to learning these skills all by yourself at such a young age? And you said nga earlier, you mentioned you've had the mentor naman, but still, you needed like some sort of you needed to form some sort of habit, right, in order for you to constantly learn about the things that you needed in order to succeed in the industry that you're in right now.
Yeah, for me, the biggest part was really curiosity. Like, I really wanted to know how things worked. And every single time na I found something like particularly interesting or amazing, first thing I would do is, especially if I can read the code, I would read their code. Especially if it's out there. And I'm sure, no to illegal stuff, but like I would read their code, like babasahin ko, like, oh, how does this work? Like, what was going on in their minds when they did this? So like I would really try to understand muna, kunwari, why does Bitcoin do this, for example, or what happens after, what are the consequences, ganito, ganyan. And that curiosity was really like the most important part of me getting to be able to teach myself how to code. Kasi, like, especially when I don't have any formal materials na I had at that time. Like, I mainly had to, parang, like, at that time kasi, diba, like, I was enclosed in a box na I was only learning the things I wanted to learn. Like, I didn't start with the foundations like everybody else na parang step by step, ganyan. So, yeah, ganun yung naging situation at that time. So if you had that curiosity, I'd say it's possible already, for anyone to get it, to make it.
I have a question. So, what was your first impression when you started like reading code? Was it overwhelming or nabigla ka ba, ganon?
Yeah, overwhelming, nosebleed, sobra. All the time naman, honestly, until now. Until now, sometimes I still like read code. I'm like, ooh.
Like,
you like look at it for like a minute, and then you like get a burger first, you like eat, you like play a game, Valorant, then you come back and you're like, okay, and you're like, clear na yung utak ko.
Parang every time you learn a new code ba, parang shocks, may bago na naman. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. Kasi syempre, like these things change, especially if it's like, open source. Most of those things change kasi syempre a lot of people are like checking the code rin. Tama ba to? And yun, nakatulong rin yun. Nakikita mo kung paano nagbabago. Pero pansin mo, like, even if those codes change, the logic still works the same. So when you look into it that way, medyo mas naiintindihan mo na parang ganyan. Pero yeah, like, to answer your question, sobrang mahirap siya, like, at first, especially if it's in a language you don't understand or don't know.
Yeah.
Or let's say na kahit na alam mo tong language na to, bakit, like, why is the words they don't look readable to me, Sometimes developers don't write readable code. That's also a thing, And that's the industry. You have to live with that. So, yeah, like, paminsan-minsan talaga hindi mo makukuha yun, like, off the get-go.
So now programming is obviously one of the more intimidating things to learn as a student, right? So what would your advice be to those who have this mindset?
Like, that programming is hard.
Yeah, the programming
everything
is hard. Honestly, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
So
takot ako mag-programming sa IT.
Alright, ease your mind. I'm not that good at programming. Like, again, as I said, I just know how things work. And a lot of people always put the most, like, importance on writing it rather than understanding it. But the whole thing is, for example, Python. Python is like in English and everything. You can actually write stuff like that. Like, you can make anything with it. So as long as you know how the programmers were thinking rather than how they wrote it, things should, like, you'd be able to piece things up themselves. Like, think about it like a puzzle. Kasi, like, think about it like, how it's flowing from top to bottom instead of thinking of writing it down. Because not gonna lie, even people like, in the industry talaga, like professionals, we still Google things. We Google things a lot. I Google things like every day. Even things I've already done before, I still recheck again and again. I'm like, oh my God, did I do this right? What the heck? So, yes, it's hard. Pero everyone has a hard time. Don't be scared of the whole idea. So, yun lang.
Like, ano masasabi mo yung pinaka-mahirap na programming language na aralan? Actually, ano muna yung inaaral mo ngayon na programming language?
The language I'm learning right now is Rust. And it's the hardest language I've ever learned in my whole life. Like, if I would like to rate myself, like, from mastery, like, I would be like, what, 40-30%? It's really hard.
I mean, did you just start learning about Rust, right? Like, recently?
Oh no. Like, I started learning like last October pa. Ganon. It's been a challenge pa rin. It takes a long time to be able to read. Yeah. But it's a really good one. That's all I gotta say. So, yun.
Ayun ba yung ginagamit ng most people in the tech industry, yung Rust? Or no naman?
No naman. It's just something that allows you to make things more secure by default and faster by default. Usually, ganun yung mga inisip ng mga tao when you come to making languages. Okay, like for people out there who are like asking the question, like, why would you choose a different programming language? Each of them have their own pros and cons. That includes your own experience. As in, like, yung experience mo while you're writing code. Python, madali lang siya mag-write. You can just write it. But then, like, off the get-go, especially if you're thinking about cost, like, I'm going to spend more money on like servers, diba, to run the same amount of users in the system kasi it's not as fast as other languages. So, yun lang.
So, when you started learning about these programming languages, like, what resources would you recommend to our listeners? Like, san maganda mag-start? And we've heard about Coursera and Udemy. And did you take any courses pa there when you started out or no?
Never. I never took any courses na mga ganon. Like, every time I work on something, first place I go to is the documentation. So the people who create it know their product best, So, for example, each language have their own documentation. So, like, just read it. You'll be able to understand it. Kasi especially if it's a well-documented language. Like, makikita mo talaga, may explanation pa, may examples pa. Those help. Like, the examples in the documentations really help. Kasi it puts things into context. Kasi kunwari you're just learning in a course. Let's say, like, okay, bootcamp. And then, okay, this is how to use variables. This is how to use, control structures like that. But then again, you're like, okay, but when do I use it? You really will not be able to put things into context that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, yung mga documentations na to, it's like easy access lang to anyone. Like, you just have to search it up and it's going to be accessible.
Yeah. Most often, like let's say a programming language has a website, you'll see that it says developers or it says documentation. So usually it's also makita mo docs.python.org or python.org/docs. Makita mo lang yun, like it's always in the same spot. They don't want people to syempre have to look for it or like spend too much energy looking for it kasi syempre they also want people to be able to learn it so that they can use it. So yeah, like most of the time talaga you it's the first thing you'll see when you open up their websites. So make sure to look out for it and make sure to keep looking and actually read them from top to bottom. I'm not telling you to memorize it. I'm telling you to understand it. So that's something you need to put your mindset into talaga.
Mindset din yun.
Yeah.
Coding is not about memorizing the codes. It's more of understanding the language, no?
Understanding the logic.
The logic.
Yeah.
And once you get that, everything falls into place na.
Yep, that's right.
Great.
So, more specifically, like, how did you make use of these self-taught skills to gain more opportunities? Like, let's say career-wise, especially na you're doing a business now.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I believe in is in order to be qualified something, you have to start doing it while you're unqualified. You know, like I would work on all sorts of weird stuff. Like talagang I would like make stuff na sobrang unsafe, sobrang weird, sobrang like this is like unreadable code, stuff like that. And I just keep working on the stuff like that until eventually, because like once you're able to understand like the logic how to get there to make something that works but not really, in a way, you'll be able to course your way into best practices na those come later kasi syempre in your life cycle, especially as a solo developer, gagawa ka lang ng gagawa, you keep prototyping, diba? You keep prototyping, make something fast, and then after that saka mo iisipin na okay, how do I make this secure now? Well, okay, this is not best practice. Don't quote me on this. Like
this is not advice.
Yeah. I mean, like for a person in the industry, you're supposed to start out with but since we're here in the context of learning, let's turn it the other way around. Tapusin mo muna. So finish it first, and then start thinking about what you could have done retroactively. Like, okay, I should have done this. I should have like fixed this. I shouldn't have done this part. That's when you do it. If you're learning. But if you're actually doing it with work, please, like make it secure to begin with. Yeah.
So when you started out, were there any personal projects that you worked with?
Yeah. Siguro my first ever smart contract like on Ethereum was my science my science and research project in the Philippine Science High School. So ayun, I did not have fun doing it. Like,
hindi siya nag-enjoy.
Yeah, that was my first smart contract. Tapos I made a little like sport betting Python code thingy. Like alam mo yun, like may mga bookies pa, all that stuff. I worked on that stuff back then. Just but then I realized looking into it, wow, this is so unsecure. Like this is not going to work well.
Hindi pa siya safe.
It's also fun muna. You look back at it.
As in, would there be times na when you're coding ba parang napapangan like, shucks, sana gawa ng code ko, sana.
Yeah. For sure. Mahirap pa nga with kasi I started out with like Python, JavaScript. Like with those stuff kasi you don't know that something is wrong until something actually goes wrong, diba? Like,
until after running it.
Yeah. So let's say na parang nagkamali ka dito. Hindi siya lalabas until dong ka talaga dong ka na eh. You know, or kunwari nasubmit mo na sa teacher mo, sa prof mo. Tapos yung pala meron ka pang mali doon. So yeah, like those things happen and I'm always praying. I'm always like, oh my god. And even until now, when I'm working with Rust, where the language is compiled, at least malalaman mo na may mali before you even send the code to somebody else. Pero even then, you like, you press like build. As biglang makikita mo, oh my god, please. Ganun lagi yung feeling.
Great. But yeah, this isn't related to your field or anything. It's just a general advice now. So what advice would you give out to college students when like it comes to learning something new or a new skill? Kasi it's apparent na you have like the discipline to like study stuff that's pretty complicated, especially at a very young age, right?
Siguro mabibigay yung advice, like you can be impressed by the whole idea of what you're like trying to get to. You can look up to it, but don't fear it. Just look at it as a goal, and always feel like you're the best in the room. I guess that's my biggest one. Like I'm a believer of the Mamba mentality. Like if you let people downplay you, like it happens all the time, like especially imposter syndrome, you know, like even until now, like as someone who is working in cybersecurity, there's always somebody better. Like in Twitter pa lang, we have to be on Twitter. May mga alerts yan. Researchers post the research there. And then you just look around at all these people. Like,
there's
wow,
always
there's always
competition.
Yeah. I mean, these guys aren't necessarily even trying to compete with you. You just look at them and you're like, damn, I suck. You know? So, yeah. Like, as someone as me, like, I'm also trying to learn cybersecurity. It's a practice. But then, if I let the whole fact of like, wow, ang layo pa ng goal ko, don't look at that part. Like, it's going to ruin your mental. So it's always the mental. Keep yourself sane, keep yourself good. But take the steps. So you're going to have to face those and take the steps talaga.
Yeah, that's actually
nice.
really nice. That's actually really nice. You're saying it's the goal is more on it's more of the mental attitude you have towards like the thing you're striving for, right? And not actually yung how far you are pa from actually achieving your goal or the place you want to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. You can take things, like you can take things to help you get there. Like remember, like you have to maintain yourself too. You have to maintain your mental also. Like certifications, for example, I don't take them just because na parang tataas salary or what. I don't have a use for a salary, but I do it so that to keep my mental up. Because I want to make sure na at least in my head I know I'm learning, and I want to make sure na I'm learning the right thing. Like some things like that. There are many ways to find that out. There are many ways to get validation. There are many ways to, ease yourself. Like of all of those negative thoughts. Find them and make use of them. Like, wag kayong mahiya to like, need something. Don't be a one-man island. You look for a mentor. Look for a friend. Look for a study group. Those things help.
Kung ano yung makakatulong sa'yo, no?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Especially napansin ko sa mga programming, right? Very important talaga yung community.
Exactly.
Like magtutulungan talaga kayo sa community na yon.
In the end kasi you're going to be working with a team rin naman eh. Might as well start na. Like,
sanayin mo na sarili mo working with others.
Tama. So like looking back at everything that you've told us, like especially starting in 2015, like figuring out coding, when you were starting to teach yourself, what advice did you wish you had?
Oh man, like learn the foundations first. that's some good advice. Honestly, like kahit na kunwari I learned some advanced topics here and there na, and alam mo yun, when I'm applying it kunwari, like when I'm applying it into an actual thing, sometimes you find out na parang okay, this would have been done so much faster, so much more easily if I just learned the foundations first. Kasi yun yung mga nagkulang-kulang, like parang, oy, paano ko ilalagay ito? Like, wait, like hindi gumagana.
Bigla kang sumabak sa mga complicated coding?
Yeah, there was a lot. Yun nga, like, I had to Google a lot, eventually. You'll be able to reduce the amount of Googling if you know the foundations eh. Like,
as in palagi kang may binabalikan na tab to like, ano ba yan?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So
parang,
yeah. So are you saying na parang you took some shortcuts ganon along the way?
Exactly. I took shortcuts.
Parang na-realize mo na, ay, hindi, this isn't the way to go. Mas okay pala na aralin ko lang yung foundation and then mas madali pa pala siya dun sa supposedly na shortcut, right?
Yeah. So parang don't be afraid to backtrack, I guess. Like no matter how far you're in, it's not shameful to like go back to something you missed or what. So ayun, as long as alam mo na talaga na natutunan mo na, like hindi yung parang kinaka-copy paste mo lang, like okay, it's something different naman na parang okay, I bookmark the place where I can copy paste it na eh. I mean like mga life hacks yun, pero like it's still much better na you'll be able to write it with confidence instead of having to do all sorts of things pa for it.
So, most of the time, but do you find yourself like copy-pasting codes tapos ine-edit mo na lang like to your own liking? Ganun ba yun?
Ano?
No.
Hindi. Okay. Hindi naman siya ganun. Like for example, I was working on an enrollment system for our client. So, yung nangyari syempre, like I'm trying to understand how parts work. Like you have to know rin what to search, you know. Hindi mo rin copy paste. None of those codes that will ever come out are going to be exactly to your you just have you have to understand like what was the person thinking when he made this. And I was like, okay, ganito. So then you'll be able to apply it back to your own context, right? So I'm not telling you na parang mag copy paste ka lang. No, that's not right either. Hello, like it's more of look into a place and then try to understand lang. So yeah, it's back to that same point.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So before we end this session of ours, is there anything you'd like to promote and share with our listeners?
Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, guys, if you're interested in programming, learning, and working inside a tech environment, a very fast-paced one and a very much so growing one, like we're looking for people. We're looking for mainly tech people, mga back end, front end in Gibki, and we're also working on a Web3 project. Check us out at Waddler After Hours, my guys.
Okay, guys, you've heard that. Check that out.
Right.
Wow, that was a really valuable talk with JM. I really like what he said about you can be impressed by the idea of what you were trying to get to, and that you should always believe that you're the best in the room, and that you should look at your dreams as a goal, but it is important that you don't fear it, because having that kind of mindset means that you've already lost even before you actually start the work. When it comes to JM, it's really more on the mindset rather than the actual work that you put in. It is also a great reminder that no matter which field you're in, there is and always will be somebody out there that's better than you, but never downplay yourself. Don't look at your goal as being far away. Keep yourself sane and good, but take the small steps towards your goals one day at a time.
Tama ka dun, Bradley. Like, super important nga yung mindset when it comes to starting to learn how to code. And for me naman, what stuck with me is when he talked about letting go of that fear when you start to learn coding. I mean, learning is overwhelming, and it's not only about learning coding, but learning in general. Clearing your head and taking breaks are important. And one more thing is that it's important to have that drive to continuously learn and adapt to that ever-changing language of coding. Mismong sariling sikap lang and tamang hanap sa tamang diskarte. And with that, thank you very much for tuning into BYTECamp. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and follow BYTE on Facebook, Instagram, and even LinkedIn.
Catch BYTECamp's next episode about a look into the work experience in startups and the corporate world, featuring Juliana Ong and Joanna Ko.
And stay tuned for more BYTECamp episodes and stay updated on our Facebook page because you might just win some cool prizes.